Hey folks, welcome back. Let's go over the solution together. I'm going to create a new file for my challenge program and then put the prompt side by side and let's go. So the prompt was to print the numbers from 1 to 100, but if the number is divisible by 3, print PIS. If it's divisible by 5, print PAS. If it's divisible by 3 and 5, print PIS PAS. Cool. So the first requirement is pretty simple, right? Just printing the numbers from 1 to 100. You could have used a while loop if you wanted to. You could have used a for loop if you wanted to. Either way is fine. I'm going to do this solution with a for loop. Now, if you use the for loop, you should have realized that using range of 100 actually prints the numbers from 0 to 99. If you really wanted to, you could have done n plus 1 inside the loop for every single loop iteration. That's not the most graceful or best way to handle it. Instead, you should have looked up online, hey, how do I change the way the range function behaves? And you should have discovered that you can actually specify the start and end of the range. So if you take a look at some example tutorials here, you can see that you can actually specify a start and stop argument for the range function, and then step is optional. And so if you don't specify more than one value, then by default it starts with 0. And so that's our first problem right there. Then the stop argument is its upper limit. In other words, it generates numbers up to this number. And that's why if you specify range of 100, it stops at 99. So if you want to go up to 100, you need to specify 101. So to fix this, we flip back to our code and we specify for n in range 1, 101, and now we should be printing the numbers from 1 to 100. And now we need to finish the other conditions. How do we check if a number is divisible by 3? Well, we've been doing it several times, although I didn't explicitly say it. We can use the modulus operator, because if a number divided by another number yields no remainder, that means it's divisible by that number. So I'm going to do if n modulus 3 is 0, then we print PIS. Else if n modulus 5 is 0, then we print PAS. And that fulfills the first two bullets of condition number 2 right there. Now here comes the interesting one, which is if a number is divisible by 3 and 5, print PIS PAS. Now how can we do this? There are technically really clever ways of solving this problem, but I just expected you to use the basic way using the Boolean logic that you just learned in the last video. So what you can do is else if n modulus 3 is equal to 0 and n modulus 5 is equal to 0. That right there solves that condition, and then we can print PIS PAS. And then, of course, another important thing, we don't want to print n every single time this loop runs. We want to execute each of these statements exclusively. So what that means is we can put in an else statement here and then indent print n. This will only execute if none of the above conditions are true. And so at this point, you might be tempted to think, we're done, we've solved all the requirements, but there's a problem with it, and let me show you what it is. If I write my code and then execute it, take a look at the output. What's not showing up? PIS PAS, right? 15 and numbers divisible by 3 and 5 are not being replaced by PIS PAS, they're only being replaced by PIS. Why is that? Well, if you remember way back to our very first lesson on conditional statements, you will remember that each of these conditions cascades downwards. When you get to the number like 15 and it's divisible by 3 and 5, it's going to first check if n is divisible by 3. And this is going to be true, so it's going to print PIS and then it's going to move on. Remember, this is a big gotcha. The conditions in an if-else-if statement are going to cascade down and check in order. So what this means is that we want the most restrictive condition to be the first item. And now I've reordered things the way I want them to. Now I just need to adjust slightly. I'm going to make this an if statement and then make the next line an else-if statement, and now the conditions should be fulfilled. If I write my changes and then execute my code, I can now confirm that numbers divisible by 3 and 5 are now replaced with PIS PAS. Alright folks, great job, and now let me give you a little bit of background. This problem that we've just worked on together is actually an infamous problem in the industry called FizzBuzz. It's the same exact thing, but instead of PIS and PAS, it's fizz and buzz. The reason this problem is infamous is because it's a really simple problem that just applies some of the fundamental concepts that I've taught you in this section, and yet there are actually candidates who apply for jobs that cannot solve this problem. Now, there could be any number of reasons why they're not able to solve it, but the one thing that's clear is that they do not fully understand the fundamentals. So, give yourself a pat on the back. You now know how to solve a problem and you understand the fundamentals behind it that a lot of job applicants actually cannot and don't. And that's what the Static Void Academy is all about, is building those stable foundations. I know that all of you want to get to building games. I know you want to start building mobile apps or start working on the next Facebook, but you gotta know the basic shit. Anyways, great work in this section. You have already learned a lot, but there's always more to learn. In the next section, we are going to learn how to work with data. How do programs work with data? How do programs store and process large sets of information? That's what you're going to learn about in the next section. Great work again, folks. Congratulations. See you in the next section.